EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 as I return back home to the studio here to give you guys another 2-hour edition of the show. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
Doing well. Got the never-ending cough, but trying to get through it. Anybody have any remedies, please hit me up because I've tried everything.
Tea with honey? I'm sure you've tried that if you've
Tried that, yeah.
That's a common one, John.
Yeah, not working.
No.
But we'll get through it.
We'll get through it. Good stuff, Johnny Mac. John, we got a full show planned today. We got two great guests for the great people. Sorry if my mic sounds a little off right now. I'm trying to work on the other one. I'll get that up for you guys in a second. We'll have Mike Gill early in the show and Brandon Lee Gouton late in the show. So a full Wednesday slate for you guys as we usually do. And then Johnny Mac, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni spoke yesterday at the Combine. I'll start with Howie Roseman. Some of the things that stuck out to you, John. He mentioned a lot of different things. A lot of people now speculating who will be back, if anyone will be back. Sounds like a lot of change is coming. And Howie asking the fans for patience through the offseason. What were your takeaways from Howie Roseman's comments yesterday?
Boy, Howie's been around long enough to know he's not getting that. He probably looks in the mirror and says, hey, guys, look what I gave you. But you're not getting patience in this town. I'll tell you that. So he can ask for it, but he's not going to get it. But he's been preparing people for a while, trying to prepare people that this is going to be a little bit of a different offseason, not the splashiest offseason like last year turned out to be. A little bit unconventional. He warned people about that, talked about the evolution.
Right.
Texting with people that were there off podium. He was much more compelling than on podium. No surprise there. Looks like Zach Baun's the guy they want to get back, which makes sense to me. I don't know how you sit through that season and watch what he did for that defense and come up with any other conclusion. So I think the Eagles are right, and that's not typically what they do. So that's when Howie said things might look a little different than they typically look. And that's, they're going to try to pay a linebacker, and they're probably going to have to wave goodbye to defensive front people, which is not the way the Eagles typically do business. So he talked about evolution. I think that in this case is a synonym for Vic Fangio more than anything, leaning on Vic. And, Vic's, for those who don't know, his expertise way back before he became a coordinator was off-ball linebacker. So nobody knows the position better. Nobody teaches it better. That's why you kind of saw not only career seasons from Zach Baun, but career season from Nakobe Dean, career season from Warren Burks when he was out there playing. I think Vic has a lot to do with that. Obviously, it's players first. I always say that, but got to get Zach Baun back, man. All pro linebackers are not a normal occurrence in these parts,
right?
In case you haven't noticed. Got to go back to Jeremiah Trotter Sr. And even then, with all due respect to Trot, he wasn't what Zach Baun was this year. Just wasn't, as far as playmaking.
Which is a pretty crazy comment, by the way. Shows you how incredible.
Well, different type of player, obviously.
Right.
Not Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but his father was a big, physical, different game at the time, downhill linebacker. Right. Certainly not the same space player Zach Baun is, but you didn't need a player like Zach Baun. So that's, the game has changed so much. Zach Baun probably wouldn't be good in that era, and Jeremiah Trotter Sr. probably wouldn't be good in this era. But as far as playmaking in the actual games, the Eagles haven't had a linebacker like Zach Baun in forever. Impactful plays almost week in and week out. So they got to bring him back. And, Howie should have probably tried to get it done during the season. He's mentioned a few times that, they were having such a good season. You don't want to upset the apple cart. You want to say, well, I'm going to extend this guy, but I'm not going to extend this guy and so forth. That can create some issues. So So I get it from that standpoint. He mentioned the same thing back during the Super Bowl 52 season. I remember him talking about that. And, it's a little bit more difficult when you're having that kind of special season. And they probably rarely are going to lose some money because of it. Going to have to pay him a little bit more, but they got to pay him. And then, it looks like Milton Williams is going to get priced out. Looks like Josh Sweat is going to get priced out. And, I think Mekhi Becton is sort of wait and see what the market is. But I think they want Mekhi back. So I would say Zach Baun's definitely going to be back. 95%. They're going to get it done. Mekhi Becton, 60-40, they get it done. I would say Milton and Josh are under 50%. Josh is under 50%.
We'll see what happens, John. Honestly, I think what you just said is a breath of fresh air in terms of thinking about it in that way. I think a lot of people listen to Howie, John, and their takeaway was he's not signing Zach Baun back. There's going to be differences on the team, and it might not look like what conventional thinking would say. Now, I know from the Eagles' perspective, you laid it out beautifully, where conventional thinking for them is sign the defensive lineman and let the linebacker walk. But I think right now there's a feeling of the obvious line of thinking is, well, sign back Zach Baun. The way Howie said it, I think people looked at that and were like, Jesus, he's not going to bring back any of the 4 free agents. I don't think it would be crazy for someone to listen to Howie yesterday and come away with that thought process. Now, I think the way you explained it makes a little bit more sense, but is there a chance people are right? He's not going to bring back any of these 4 guys?
No, zero. I would say zero chance of that.
He's going to bring some people back.
He's going to bring some people back, but you can't bring everybody back. And I mentioned again, off podium, he mentioned something about a layered, a layer cake, and talking about sometimes you got to replace the layer. You still got to have the foundation, but you got to replace the layers on top of it.
Right.
You're going to lose some players. And he's mentioned that, when you have so many good, accomplished players that you have to pay, and they've already paid them, think about all the guys they're paying on the offensive side of the football from a standpoint of Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even on the offensive line, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, et cetera. They got to get something done with Cam Jurgens. We'll see how that – they got to pay a lot of people. And for the second consecutive year, Howie mentioned the same thing about playing young players. You're going to have to do more of it. They did more of it. It worked out beautifully. They're going to have to continue to do that because when you're paying that many stars, that means you need younger players to fill in. And this year worked perfectly, and that's maybe part of the patience because the odds of another group of rookies coming in and performing like Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean are probably not great, to be honest, but that's the way you have to do it. You can't. I think the assumption is, I forget everybody's got a podcast now, but somebody said the Eagles, I think it was Joe Burrow. Well, the Eagles pay everybody, essentially. And no, they don't. They pay,
It was Joe Burrow who said that.
Yeah. They don't pay everybody, and you're going to see that this offseason. You can't pay everybody. But they pay, they've made the right decisions on who to pay and who to keep around to this point. And it's always a fluid situation. But you can't just say pay everybody.
Yeah.
I
think, John, there's some beauty in that comment, just in the sense of that's how good everything worked for this team this year. That people come away observing the Eagles and they're like, man, they pay everybody. They do everything right. Their roster's amazing. Their GM's amazing. Their coaching staff's great.
They're in people's
The outside perception of the Eagles right now, though, John, is that they are the best organization right now in football with the way they operate. And you're hearing that from a star quarterback in Joe Burrow. I think it's pretty impressive, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, they're in people's heads.
Yeah,
so if Eagles fans want to spike the football on something, they're in people's heads. You look at the Myles Garrett stuff; they're in people's heads.
Yeah, they are.
Like everybody's like, oh, the Eagles better give up a decent amount for Myles Garrett. They're talking about collusion and tampering and blah, blah, blah. Banning the tush push. Eagles are, instead of doing it the way you should do it, like I said yesterday on the show, you now boil it down to one play, and you're not going to pass that.
Right.
But you can get pushing out of the game if you just did it the right way. And it eventually, I guarantee it eventually will be removed from the game. But if you boil it down to one play, by the way, the Eagles don't even use that much from a statistical standpoint. They're in people's heads. Think about how many times the Eagles run the tush push in the season compared to total offensive plays. Don't make it 3rd and 1. Don't make it 4th and 1. How about that?
Probably
But you're boiling it down to one play. You're boiling it down to one play, and it becomes a thing. The Eagles are in people's heads, man, in this league, significantly.
It's a great way to put it. They really are in people's heads. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, Nick spoke as well. A couple other things happened, and we'll get into all that. We got 2 great guests coming up with Mike Gill and Brandon Leak out. And so great takeaways, though, from you on Howie's comments. I always love to get your perspective on things. I think you, as you always say, elevate the conversation in terms of what Howie was trying to get across. But again, impressive stuff. I will just circle back on the story that dominated the early week with the White House. And again, McMullen was correct yesterday. A whole lot of fake news, everybody. So yesterday I saw a clip of the president who was speaking and was asked about the Eagles. So sounds like he's going to extend the invite to the Philadelphia Eagles. And if you were correct again yesterday, the Eagles will accept that invitation and they will make their way to the White House at some point this offseason.
Yeah. And again, individually, if certain players don't want to go, they don't have to go. But the organization is going to accept it, and they accepted it last time. I think that's a bit of a misnomer too.
Yeah, it is.
Actually, the White House pulled it at the very last minute. Actually, the night before, because I was getting ready to go down there, and they pulled it the night before and turned it into some other kind of celebration. But yeah, so yeah, they're going to accept it. Doesn't mean the players, individual players, can't say, I would advocate going only because it's pretty cool to go to the White House.
I would certainly advocate going, and I would say that if you
Yeah,
were
I
on one
would
side
say
of the
that
aisle,
anyway.
though, the one thing I hate about
that's what
but
politics
I don't
have
care
become.
what side you're on. If you're on a side where you can't even handle your professional football team going to a White, and I don't care who it is. I really don't care who the president is. I think you got to check. You got to look yourself in the mirror. I mean, come on here. But
I believe it. I'm with you 100% on that. I don't care if it's Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Barack Obama. If your team wins the championship in any particular sport and they get invited to the White House, I would encourage all fans to say, hey, they should go to the White House because it's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, and I would encourage all the players to go as well. No, they don't have to listen to me, nor will they listen to me, but I would encourage them to go as well and not worry about the people who are going to, act like you're a villain for going to the White House because you won a Super Bowl. I mean, come on.
Well, sadly, there are many people that would do that, and that's part of the problem.
Because I think there are players who will cave to that pressure.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt because they don't. A lot of people don't want to be blasted on social media constantly, and there will be people that blast them. So yeah, a lot of guys will probably say, you know what, I don't want to deal with that. And it's sad, but that's where we are in this country. Everything is political. Everything is you better believe what I believe, or you're a piece of shit, basically, which is insanity. And people need to get over that, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. Let's put it bluntly. I don't know when it started, where it started, but the idea that everyone has to acquiesce to your point of view is one of the stupidest things on the planet.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And then Dirty Air brings up a good point. He says it isn't always about pressure. Some people stand on their morals. That's fine if that's what they believe, Dirty Air. But I hope it's for that reason and not for the pressure reason. But
A lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But your moral conviction is tantamount to agreeing with someone else's moral conviction and that other person's views. To too many people, not everybody, but to too many people, if you don't agree with their views, well, this is family people. You've seen family not talk to each other because of politics. That have, and largely they argue over issues that have no bearing on them whatsoever. But I don't want to go down this route. But just understand that you can't expect everyone to agree with you with everything. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking about everybody in general. If you believe that, you're the problem. You're the problem.
I agree. Good stuff there, Johnny Mac. So we'll see what the Eagles end up doing with that. It does seem like they will get an invitation from the White House, though. That early report was fake news, everybody, as the word I used yesterday. So we will move on from that. And then we recapped the Howie Roseman comments, which, I thought John recapped beautifully. So good stuff there from Johnny Mac. We'll get to a quick commercial break. I'm not going to take a break. I'll just give you guys the live read for BetUS, and then we'll get to our man Mike Gill joining us now. So let's get to Mike Gill. Before I do that, I want to tell you guys about the great people at BetUS. Go and check them out. It's betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. Use that promo code YouTube150. You get 150% sign-up bonus on your very first deposit. You get 125% on your second and third deposit, all up to $2,000. So deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa. And a big thanks to them for sponsoring the 2-hour show today here on Wednesday, February 26th. Let's get to Mike Gill joining us now on Birds 365. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing? Appreciate you joining in on this Wednesday morning from 97.3 ESPN.
Good morning, everybody. What's going on?
Michael, I'm sure you saw the Howie Roseman comments from yesterday. We were just talking about him before you came on. And listening to some of the people that were there, I was texting with, there were off the podium comments that were a little more, I think, defined than he was on the podium, which is no surprise. But I just want to get your thoughts of what Howie was trying to get across, because he talked about evolution. He talked about not looking the same way maybe that it traditionally looks. What do you take from just those little breadcrumbs from Howie Roseman as far as the Eagles in this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, he really kind of stressed that, it's going to be different and that they are going to have to get contributions from some of their younger players, right? I mean, it seemed like I guess the one breadcrumb is if there's guys that walk or leave that we can't bring back, they think they have guys in the pipeline. Darius Slay, if he's not here anymore, we've got all these young players that we've had in the system for a while. If Josh Sweat leaves, we drafted a guy last year that we kind of like in that spot. If Milton Williams isn't here anymore, Mauro Ojomo's here, and Gabe Hall's the guy that we picked up that maybe people don't remember. But it seemed the messaging was if somebody leaves, we feel like we have young players that can kind of step into those spots. Now, I think it's kind of far-fetched to believe that they're not. I believe, I've said this on my show, guys, I think Howie is going to do what the Dodgers did here. They won a World Series and then said, we'll go out and get the best pitcher and then the next best pitcher and then have the whole league complain about us. I feel like they're at that point with, you have the last time they won, they had this window and they thought that the window was still there. So they put money into players that were older to try to win again. And that kind of backfired on them. This time their talent is in their 20s, mid-20s, late 20s. So I think they feel like they have 2 to 3 real windows with this core of guys like 26, 27, 28 years old. And then that's where you go and make the big splash move that can help you now. I know a lot of people talk about the Myles Garrett stuff. And I see people saying, well, I don't want to give up my future. I think the Eagles are saying our future is now. It is 2 to 3 years with these guys right here. And if we can add something that is right in their prime lined up with those guys, I would think they would
To your point, Mike, I'm amazed how many people talk about football like it's baseball or basketball and talk about their future. Like, so you're going to have this guy for 10 years in baseball. Your future in football is 2-3 years at all times.
You remember a time where the Rams were the laughing stock because they had no first round picks, and everyone was like, they don't have a pick for like 9 years.
Yeah.
They were a play away from going to the NFC Championship game and beating the Eagles on the road.
In the snow.
In the snow. I look at the Eagles too and say, listen, they have hit on every pick imaginable for like the last 3-4 drafts.
Yeah.
The well is going to run dry here. So I want to give you my pick and let you take it for me. Give me a player that I know can play, because I've been too hot with some of these picks in recent years. That's not the reason, but if I can look, pick 32 is a pick that is very tradable. So I think, I'm sure you guys talked a little bit about what Jeremy Fowler said yesterday regarding Myles Garrett, but I thought what he said at the beginning of that clip was the more interesting part, is that the Eagles want to be the most aggressive team in the league in the trade market this offseason. That was the one that I was like, whoa, okay. So I think you're going to have a pretty aggressive offseason. Now, what he said yesterday makes it seem like that's not the case, but I think it's a smokescreen.
We'll see what ends up happening, Mike. A lot of people took away from Howie's comments yesterday that everybody could be out the door. I kind of hear what you were saying, where it's like, hey, young guys are going to have to play better. It's going to look a little bit unconventional. John's still feeling like Zach Baun is a guy that they're going to sign. Did you feel like Howie was saying Zach Baun will not be back in Philly, or what did you make of those comments?
Well, wouldn't that be the unconventional thing, that they spend the money on the linebacker?
That was John's point. Yep.
Right. If we're targeting somebody, it would be the unconventional guy in your mind. We see, and that's why I think Baun is the guy that, number one, they must bring back, and number two, that they will prioritize, because they don't mind investing draft capital in D tackle. They don't mind investing draft capital in edge rusher. They don't mind investing draft capital in offensive line. They don't want to invest draft capital in linebacker. So if I have a guy that I like, I know they don't want to spend money at that position, but maybe they have shifted a little bit and said, listen, we've paid this guy. We have a little money left over that we can now overpay the linebacker that we generally don't like, because we don't feel like drafting another one. And we'll draft another edge. We'll draft another tackle. We'll draft another guard. That's why I think Baun is the guy that they'll target, probably spend money on him that they typically don't want to. They also don't want to spend money in running back. They decided to do that last year. Worked out for them. So I think Baun is the guy they'll prioritize over the other three, not because they don't like the other three, but, you can't pay everybody. And they have a propensity to draft well at the positions they might lose.
There you go. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think I read it the same way as you. He also talked about evolution, basically talking about Saquon and paying the running back position. I thought there were a lot of highlights that pointed to the Eagles understand they need Zach Baun back, and they want to bring Zach Baun back. And then the difference is, as you mentioned, and how we said, and I bring it up all the time, it was during the Cam Jurgens draft pick when he was getting a lot of heat. That's how we roll. He was talking about offensive front, defensive front. And he flat out said, if it's equal, we're going to lean towards those two parts of the roster building philosophy. And here's an instance where you got Milton Williams coming off the Super Bowl that he had, and Josh Sweat coming off the Super Bowl that he had, and they're not going to pay those guys. I think those are the guys out the door. And that is very un-Eagles-like, traditionally.
Yeah.
I think that's what Howie was alluding to. And they're difficult decisions. You'd like to have them both back, but
Both homegrown guys too. Milton Williams in his 20s
yeah.
still. I mean, not an older player. So yeah, he would be and Milton has the story of him and Tom Donahue. He was kind of the pick that was Howie's guy, and Donahue was like, great. So you would think like there was even an extra soft spot for him.
Right.
But I think, at the Super Bowl, I think I might have told you guys this before. I'm sitting there and Drew Rosenhaus is behind me, and we're laughing about how Sweat went to Rosenhaus, and we said, look, Sweat and Milton Williams have the best two matchups on the field. They have the ability to make some money on Sunday night, and they have the matchups to make the money, and they took full advantage of those matchups and absolutely made themselves some money. So they probably have priced themselves out. Milton Williams would probably be the guy of the two. If they could pick two of the guys, I think it would be Milton Williams and Beck, Zach Vaughn to bring back. I think they would want to bring Becton back next. Josh Sweat, I think last year the writing was on the wall. He had a great Super Bowl. He had a solid season. I wouldn't say he had he wasn't a Pro Bowl or anything. So I think they're okay with Josh Sweat moving on. And that goes back to they like drafting at those positions. Those are positions they don't mind drafting and then just replenishing at those spots. They do have Jalix Hunt here, a guy they drafted last year in the 3rd round, who I think surprised everybody with the year he had, right? I mean, he nobody thought he'd put a helmet on for the most part last year. And here he is wrecking havoc, in playoff games and in the Super Bowl. So, I think it'll be interesting, but the whole evolution of getting to where you're comfortable with Zach Vaughn and saying he's our guy and then paying him, we'll see if that if they go through with that, because I think they should.
Yeah, and we'll see how much Zach Vaughn ends up getting paid. I mean, I know TJ Edwards is not even close to the same player, but think about it. He had a good year here, and they let him walk at $7 million. Now we're talking about a $15 million linebacker potentially. That's a tough putt, but he's a great player. Now it's only 1 year. How much does Howie factor that in? It'll be interesting to see. Mike, you brought up something interesting with the 2 to 3 year window. All right, and the Eagles are sitting at 32 in the draft right now. Sounds like you're in on the Myles Garrett move. What are you willing to give for Myles Garrett? And at what point would you walk away from that deal and say, you know what, I can't make that move right now? Because there's a lot of names being floated around there, Mike. And, when you have the 32 overall pick, you're competing with teams that have a lot better draft picks. You're gonna have to sweeten that pot up a little bit. Is it Nolan? Is it Cooper DeJean? Is it Devontae Smith? And I know those names sound crazy. People are like, why would you ever send them? But you're going to have to send somebody to get Myles Garrett. What's too much for you, and what would you be willing to do to get Myles?
Yeah, that's been the big, is what do the Eagles have on their current roster that the Browns would ask for? Now, you mentioned other teams. Garrett has made it pretty clear he wants to go to a Super Bowl contending team. So I don't know if he says, hey, I don't want to go to the XYZ team, who he deems to be a Super Bowl contending team and who he doesn't deem to be a Super Bowl contending team. Because obviously everybody has better draft capital right now than you do. So obviously 32 starts the talk, probably next year's 1st round pick as well. Then it becomes what player gets involved. Is it Nolan Smith, that level of player? Is it, somebody threw out on our show yesterday, a sign and trade with Josh Sweat? I don't know that gets it done for Cleveland. Jalix Hunt's another young player. I don't know that he's ready enough to be able to bring you back a player like that. The guys you mentioned, I'm probably out on. Cooper DeJean, Devontae Smith, not moving there. But Nolan Smith is one guy that I think you have to consider. And people out there say, no way. Nolan Smith, young player, not saying you shouldn't be excited about him, but what's his ceiling? Is he a 14 sack guy on the edge? Is he a 12 sack guy? Is he a 10 sack guy?
You're not Myles Garrett.
Myles Garrett gets 14. He's a disruptor. And with Myles Garrett, it not only is it Myles Garrett, it is also what it would do for Jalen Carter. I think Nolan Smith's a great player. Don't get me wrong. Wouldn't want to lose him. But you're talking about a different stratosphere of player here. I don't know if Nolan Smith's ceiling is a 14-sack season, and I think that's what you're signing up for with Myles Garrett. If you lose Nolan Smith to Cleveland, he probably goes there, and who knows? I mean, maybe he has 14 sacks for Cleveland, and they're 3-14. But is he getting 14 sacks and being that big of a disruptor here? Unfortunately, I don't see that for Nolan. I think he's kind of like in the 8 to 9 sack mold, somewhere in that range. Hopefully, I'm wrong about that. So I think Nolan you would have to consider.
So 2 1s and Nolan, you're pulling the trigger on that deal.
I think so, yeah, because the ones for me at this point, look, you could get a player. Nolan Smith was what, the 30th pick,
30th pick, 30th,
yeah, somewhere down there. You can find talent. It's not like the NBA where if you're drafted at the end, you're just picking a guy and stashing him overseas for a couple of years. So these aren't just throwaway picks, but I think Philadelphia is young enough right now that they can afford to get a player who can put you over the top now. And you're already over the top. You just won the Super Bowl. Well, to become that next level franchise, that next tier, memorable teams, Philadelphia Eagles, back-to-back, one of the best. Now you're getting talked about as one of the best franchises and best runs of all time. You get a player like that does it for you.
I agree with you, but here's where I am on Myles Garrett. Boy, there's so much conflicting signals. You had the Fowler report, as you mentioned, talking about the Commanders. All of a sudden, Jonathan Allen's on the trade market. You can see was Washington bubbling up to try to get Myles Garrett. Then it becomes, I always bring up back in the day when the Sixers and Celtics were a great rivalry. The Celtics went out and got Dennis Johnson specifically to stop Andrew Toney. Then I look at it. That's also what bad GMs do. Like, you're worried about what another team's doing, changing your plan. That's the part that didn't ring true with Howie Roseman of Jeremy Fowler's report to me. But here's where I want to bring that up.
You mean
as a
blocking
whole.
Washington to get him, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's not how good GMs do business. That's reactionary. I don't think Howie would fall down that rabbit hole. But boy, Howie's in everybody's head, man. That's what I said before you came on, Mike. The tush push. Certain people want to ban the play. I said, you want to stop the tush push? Here's what you do. I said on the show, ban pushing. The whole entirety of it. Yeah. It used to be illegal. Don't boil it down to one play. The Eagles ran 47 times this year. That's it. 47 times.
I say that about, like, do I want to see it banned? No, it benefits the team that I want to see it benefit. However, I do kind of think it's ridiculous that you could have 2 other players just physically push the guy forward, and the defense isn't allowed to get any leverage. They can't push off of somebody to get leverage. I mean, they're not allowed to do it. Like you talk about field goal blocks, they can't physically put their hands on someone to utilize him to get up. They can't do it. So why can't it? The play should be illegal. I'm not saying I want it to be illegal. I think the Eagles
you're going to get in trouble.
But
that's what I'm saying, Mike. It's a simple fix. You say, hey, we're going to ban pushing. Period. Then I do think it is actually
in the rules. I think it is a rule. They were talking about this morning on one of the radio shows, the ESPN National show, had it up on the screen. They actually had the rule up on the screen. It's like Rule 14, whatever, that you're not supposed to be able to push to help.
Well, no, you can push. They changed that rule in 2005. They changed that. It used to be illegal, and for some bizarre reason, for those who don't know, it actually started at the college level, the famous Bush push with Reggie Bush, if you remember that. That's when all of this got started. And for some reason, the NFL went down this rabbit hole. You see Sean McDermott, some guys talking about the health and safety. That's bullshit because nobody gets hurt on that play or nobody's gotten hurt. And the play is so used so infrequently, there's no way you can come up with a study. However, if you expand it to the entirety of the offense, and I bring up Devontae Smith in the Saints game, you remember when he almost got his head taken off and they wouldn't blow the whistle because they kept pushing him forward. And all of a sudden you got guys diving in after the play is over. It's such an easy fix. But the Eagles are in people's heads, and they go down the routes of one particular play instead of using we're going to ban pushing on offense. And then they get it passed this year. They will never get past banning the tush push.
See,
but they will get past
the rule
banning pushing.
This is the rule. And Zander, I just emailed it to you. So if you see it and you want to put it on the screen, you can. No offensive player may pull a runner in any direction at any time, which is what they're not doing. Yeah. B, use interlocking interference by grasping a teammate or using his hands or arms to encircle the body. So that's not what they're doing. C, push or throw his body against a teammate to aid him in an attempt to obstruct an opponent or recover a loose ball. I mean, it says push or throw his body against a teammate in an attempt to obstruct an opponent
to cover a loose ball. Yeah.
So that's a little murky.
Yeah.
But
no, you're allowed to push. You're completely allowed to push. You can't push someone away from a loose ball, which again, the over legislation.
It is murky, man.
The over legislation of this league is ridiculous. That's another thing. You make it more difficult for the officials. Everybody hates the officials. Part of the reason I always say they don't hate the officials. Well, they do, but they hate the legislation of the game.
The legislation of the game.
Yeah. What they're asking the officials to do. So when you put, and again, 2005 was the year they put it back in that you were allowed to push players offensively. Now, if the ball's on the ground, you can't, because then you're getting an unfair advantage. Again, the over legislation. But it's such an easy fix. Go back to the 2004 rule. No pushing whatsoever. Bam, it's done. And by the way, the Eagles are still the best quarterback sneak team in the football.
Yeah,
they were.
Yeah, now, I mean, Nick gave a whole passionate reason. Like, they do it more, they practice it, and what goes into it, and the intricacies, and how much goes into it all, and so I'm not saying there's no skill involved in what they do intricately up front. I'm just saying I think the part of the two guys lined up behind Jalen Hurts, that part of it.
Well, here's the funny thing.
Could probably not be legal.
Jeff Carr, our buddy, and Mike's buddy as well, Mr. Stat, I like to call him.
I saw this stat.
Yeah, the Eagles were 39 of 48. They were better at quarterback sneaks during the Super Bowl 52 run, just traditional quarterback sneaks, because Carson Wentz was really good at it.
Right.
The offensive line, obviously, with Jason Kelce was tremendous. Percentage-wise, they were actually better with the traditional quarterback sneak. Now part of the reason there was a little bit of a downtick this year than there typically is because teams are so hyper-focused on stopping it. You have the Eagles occasionally jumping off sides. You have others jumping off sides. You have penalties. All that factor into it because everybody's so hyper-driven on stopping this particular play. If the Eagles just went back to the traditional quarterback sneak, they'd be more effective. I believe that. And I've said it, and they were, and they would be again. You're not stopping that offensive line and that quarterback.
It sounds, though, like it's not. I mean, 24 owners have to approve it. It's been on the table before. What traction did it get the first time?
Because they're trying to ban a play. They will never ban that play.
No, I'm saying, what traction did it get? Any traction, votes, or anything the first time it was on the table?
Well, got a few, but when they bring stuff to the floor, they've already done the behind the scenes work. In other words, they removed it. They didn't vote on it because they
that's what I thought.
They knew they didn't have the 24 votes. They will not get 24 votes to ban the tush push. They will get 24 votes to ban pushing on offense, if they want to go that direction, if they're smart enough to move it. And it sounds like there's enough people that are going to bring up the safety issue that can get that passed. But they're not going to pass it as long as it's currently constructed. They're not going to ban that play. It's
funny, though, how it has been the talk of the combine so far. I mean,
the Eagles are in people's heads.
Yeah, every team has this. I've seen at least 5 different, Morris in Atlanta. You had McDermott in Buffalo. You got the Green Bay, who's the ones who put it on the table. There's been a bunch of people commenting on whether or not Todd Bowles, actually, who's on the competition committee, doesn't think it should be banned.
Yeah. It's not getting passed.
This is my problem with the whole thing. All right. There's only one team this successful at doing this. This is a physical game in football. If you approach this, though, okay, every time someone's in 4th and 1, all they do is push, and they get a first down and they keep moving the sticks. The game has become boring. It's not that, though. The Eagles are the one team, the one outlier team that does this successfully because of the personnel, because of the players that they have, and because of the way they run it. You know, I love Nick Sirianni's comment the other day. He's like, I find it disrespectful the way people talk about how easy this thing is. We work on this thing all year long. These guys put their bodies on the line to run this play successfully. So that's the one thing I hate about it. I'm like, why is everybody acting like this thing is a gimme? It's not a gimme.
Well,
you're going up against defensive linemen. It's not a gimme.
A lot of people thought that Jason Kelsey was kind of the catalyst for it, and what happened when he was gone.
Well, they were better with Jason, by the way.
But they didn't stop doing it, and they got better at it as the year went on. So, yes, Kelsey probably played a big role in it, but it wasn't just, hey, this is the guy who causes this to work. He might have been a big part of it.
With all due respect to Nick, though, because I thought, come on, dude, you look. First of all, Buffalo is very successful at it, and the Sean McDermott credit. He believes it should be removed because of the safety precaution. I don't know if it's credit. Credit's not the right word, but he's been very successful. And by the way, look who their quarterback is. Mm-hmm. This ain't brain surgery.
Green Bay ran it with a tight end, and they ran it pretty well.
Yeah, I mentioned that. A lot of teams do that in college level. They do it really effectively. And I think that's a way, if you can get a tight end like that, that's a good way to do it. But from Nick's standpoint, there's no contact in practice. Very rare. They're not doing scrums in practice. The Eagles are good. Let's be honest. The Eagles are good at it because they have the best offensive line in football, and they have a quarterback who can squat 600 pounds and is very savvy running the football. That's why Buffalo's number 2. Because they have a quarterback who's an outrageously sized athlete, so they're very successful at it. Patrick Mahomes once got hurt. Kansas City doesn't even run quarterback sneaks because they're worried about getting the quarterback. There's so many quarterbacks who can't do it. The Eagles are successful because of their personnel, not because of their preparation on this particular play. This is not Bill Walsh, West Coast offense, fooling people. This is my guy's better than your guy, and we're going to push you off the ball. And my other guy.
But doesn't that prove it's not a good reason to ban the play?
I'm talking about the preparation standpoint.
Yeah, I got you.
I don't think they should ban the play.
I don't think they should ban the play.
Yeah.
I don't want them to change it. I'm saying if I was the NFL, I would just say, look, you can run the play. You can line up in that formation. You just can't have the 2 running backs directly behind the quarterback and then pushing him forward. I think that's where the play kind of becomes where people look at it and say, well, you're getting all this assistance to just push the pile forward because you got these 2 guys.
That's the part that drives me insane. They don't need it. Jalen doesn't need the help. He's getting it anyway.
Right. Well, the aesthetics of that part, I think, is where some people, but hey, if you keep, if they're going to keep it in the game, I think the Eagles will continue to prosper from it. And I'll be okay with that.
I have no problem. Let me ask you this then, John, but because I don't necessarily disagree with you, but let's just say for a second the league does decide, okay, let's ban this play. Let's get rid of this stupid tush-push play. Everybody's crying about it. All right, get rid of it. It's 4th and 1, okay, and at the opponent's 45-yard line. Are the Eagles going to go for it?
Yeah.
All right. And then I feel like who cares at this point because the Eagles
they trust the offensive line. They trust the quarterback.
Which they should, by the way. I say this all the time. If you're a team that thinks you could win a Super Bowl and you don't think you can get a yard, I mean, that's where that's where you are. You're a great team. We can get a yard whenever we want to. You're going to get stopped every once in a while. But ultimately, if you're that good with that offensive line, you got to be able to get a yard in any fashion. Push, hand it off, whatever you do. That line should be able to get you a yard on almost every single play.
For me, it has nothing to do with the Eagles. I want pushing out of the game offensively. Has nothing to do with the Eagles, and I think if you frame it like that, you can get it out of the game.
For instance, could the defense essentially take the two linebackers and the safeties and line them up and have them just push each other forward?
Yeah.
So now you have all this inertia pushing. I mean, it's like a tug of war type of situation, and then the other part of it becomes like you got the two running backs back there. When do you put another guy back there and then another guy back there? You have to line up, obviously, but you can put three guys in the backfield.
You can. Yeah,
the one area I do think you can tell the pushing impacts is like there's some tush pushes that they start and it almost looks like for a second they might not get there, and then you kind of see the whole pile like move forward. Those are the ones where I think you could make a case like the pushing is why they converted it successfully, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit petty, to be honest, from the Packers and all that stuff, but I get it. I don't think you guys are wrong, but I do think that with the Eagles being the one team that is this successful with it, it's petty.
Hey, listen, if it wasn't the Eagles and this was some other random team that just happened to run this play a lot, I don't think anybody's really talking about it.
No, well, I don't think and that's the mistake of the people that want it banned. They shouldn't have boiled it down to one team, and success or failure has nothing to do with it from the perspective of why the people who want pushing out of the game. And I'm talking about Sean McDermott mentioned it yesterday. Again, number one in quarterback sneaks is the Eagles. Number two is Buffalo. Buffalo's had tremendous success, but Sean McDermott wants to remove it from the game. All right. Why does he want to remove it from the game? I don't know, Sean McDermott. He says for safety reasons, whatever. He's part of the competition committee as well. Certainly there's a safety dogma around the NFL. They do, this, Mike. You're a longtime football fan. I go back to Mike Allstock because that's when I think it changed. You remember in goal line offense back in the day, your forward momentum got stopped. They blew the whistle. The play's over. Now they let it go and let it go and let it go. And you got all these big bodies running in, trying to stop on both sides. You can see how that would be a safety issue.
Mike Allstock played in the first college football game I ever went to, Purdue, West Virginia. Purdue,
West Virginia. Great goal line runner.
Yep.
Remember Chris Berman used to have the great highlights of those Mike Allstock runs. But it used to be, all right, momentum, boom, whistle. And you play the next play. Now they let it go forever. And I think they've gone too far. And that's why I think eventually it's going to be removed. But it's not going to be removed if they continue to frame it as the Eagles tush push. They will not pass that. If they scale it back and say, we're going to remove pushing from offensive football, it will pass this year. I believe that. But, they haven't framed it like that yet.
Yeah, I'm watching on the screen here. There's a whole segment on this tush push, and there's Sirianni talking about it. And I'm watching some of it like this. There's the two that I just saw. Hurts barely even got touched by the two guys behind him. The offensive line just blew the defensive players off the ball, and he
typically landed. It's typically landed.
Yeah, no, he ran right to the left behind Dickerson, and.
Well, it is funny. I mean, there's a video floating around. The Packers are the one who submitted it. There is a video floating around right now of Jordan Love attempting a tush push. It was one of the worst tush pushes you'll ever see. So it's like, all right, if you want to freaking cry that someone else is good at it, then draft a different style of quarterback.
Well, and by the way, this was a discussion last year when this came up again, or was it last year, the year before, when they were doing it, and people were complaining about it then, about, hey, if you want to stop it, or if you want to, there's a Twitter meme of Sirianni where he's like, if everybody could do it, they would. And
That's
so,
true too.
Well, what's ironic about what you just said, Mike? Two of the last 3 years, there's been this come up in the offseason where someone tries to get the team banned or get the push banned. Those are the 2 years the Eagles went all the way to the Super Bowl. The year that they got bounced and destroyed in the first round of the playoff, nobody gave a shit. They still ran the push last year.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's hard for people to understand. Like, Green Bay did it, so I get, from a fan perspective, Green Bay's sour eggs, whatever. They're just jealous.
The
Blah,
quote
blah,
is,
blah.
"It's bad for the game."
It's bad for the game, yada yada. A lot of people have said that. They're going again. I believe they're going about it the wrong way. Well, you're talking one of 31 teams. However, that's not how these things work. These rule proposals, everybody puts them up. They all group together. One team's got to put them up. For whatever reason, Green Bay decided to be in the forefront of this particular one. There's other teams, as I just brought up. Sean McDermott is the second most successful team at quarterback sneaks. He's on record now saying, we got to get it out of the game. Like, it's not just Green Bay. Because that team, the Eagles, because of John Ferrari, over the past 10 years, nobody has put up more rule proposal changes than the Philadelphia Eagles. Nobody.
Since 2022, the Eagles have used that play 108 times.
Think about
the
that.
Next closest team is 55, Buffalo.
Yeah. 108 times over 3 seasons.
Buffalo's used it 55 times.
Yeah. The NFL is very dumb when they want something. They don't do it the right way. I always say the over legislation, you put a face on it, and now you have all this. Eagles fans are upset. Packers fans are whiners, blah, blah, blah. Packers team's a whiner. And you got all these people in the background going, we got to get this out of the game.
Now, this one in the Super Bowl they used, he had about 4 guys pushing him forward here. 1, 2, Barkley, Goddard, Wilson. Who's this other guy in here? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, he had a nice contingent of guys pushing him.
And by the way, from a traditional quarterback sneak standpoint, again, I think people understand. You see now that people are so hyper-focused because of the Eagles' success. You see this big collective of everybody within an inch of the line of scrimmage, and everybody's jumping Frankie Louvu in the championship game.
Yeah.
Trying to time it, all that kind of stuff.
Well, will that be a discussion, John, of teams that will slow the game down with the penalties and that?
Yeah, that'll be part of the discussion. But if you take it out for those concerned that the Eagles won't be as successful, and again, the history and stats say they will be just as successful, arguably more successful, that loosens up that little interior in front of the quarterback. And then the quarterback can just run up to the line of scrimmage, walk up to the line of scrimmage, look at where the bubble is. This is what Tom Brady was great at. All right. You got 2 guys lined up over the right shoulder. I'm just going the other way. Simple.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect the Eagles at all. And I'm 1,000% certain on that. They will still be just as successful. They will, as long as Jalen Hurts and that offensive line are here, they're going to be just as successful. They're going to be just as aggressive because it's going to be a traditional quarterback sneak for them on 4th and 1 is just as easy as a tush push, arguably more easy because, again, you open it up a little bit. And that's how things sort of shift back and forth, the pendulum theory. So many people are focused on it. Now they wouldn't be focused on it, and it opens up something else. So we've wasted too much time on it, but that's my fault. Yeah. But, and again, how many plays, Mike? 100 and what over 3 years?
108, I think it said.
108. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
How many total plays has the offense run in that 3-year period?
It's about
and as
65 to 75 a game.
As Jeff Kerr his stat was they ran it 40 something times. They were 37 of 48 when they ran it, but they got stopped 9 times. And in those 9 instances that they got stopped, they ran it again the next play and converted that 8 times. So essentially they were 47 of 48 in getting a first down or a touchdown.
Yeah.
98% conversion rate with that play.
And I believe in Super Bowl 52 that season, and that was Jeff as well, but Carson Wentz was 100%. 100%.
Carson Wentz was a damn good quarterback, sneak quarterback too.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
He found that little slide. He
Yeah.
slipped right through that little
Yes, he
A
was.
gap there.
I always felt like he could dive like 1.5 yards too. He was like 6'6" and shit. But
Well, you get certain quarterbacks. It was like Michael Vick couldn't slide. It's like he didn't know how to slide. Remember that was the offseason. Like, oh, he's on a baseball field learning how to slide. It's like some guys don't know how to slide. Other guys don't know how to go forward to get a yard. I guess there is some skill in knowing how to kind of not only.
Oh, there is one of the best quarterback sneak. The 2 best I've ever seen. Tom Brady, and who is obviously not the athlete. I'm pretty sure Tom can't squat 600 pounds. He was a great quarterback sneak quarterback, and Brad Johnson was phenomenal at quarterback sneaks. Those are the 2 best I've ever seen.
Having the ability to use the leverage, like getting, use your legs to kind of push you forward so that your leverage is going forward as opposed to just kind of trying to dive over. There's a whole heck of a lot of stuff that goes into it.
Yeah, no doubt. Mike, real quick, last question for you, brother. Let's just say for a second that they keep that 32 overall pick. The combine's starting up tomorrow.
Yeah, man.
What position group are you watching the most where you think the Eagles will add to their roster if they are to draft either at that position or around that position, assuming they might make a trade up or down? What's the one position group you got your eyes set on this week at the Combine?
Well, it's the 2. It's defensive tackle and it's edge rusher, and they're both pretty deep in this particular draft. I think defensive tackle at 32 probably – would be top on the list, especially if you lose Milton Williams. I guess, you have Jordan Davis for another season at least. You got Jalen Carter here. They've got Ojomo. Gabe Hall's a guy they signed from the Raiders. So, I mean, there's a younger player that was a high pick at one point. So they do have some younger depth at that spot, more so than maybe the edge position. But those 2 positions are loaded with deep, with talent, where 32 would be in play for both of them. Obviously, you're not looking at a linebacker at 32, I would imagine there. The other spot I guess you can think about is somewhere on the offensive line. At some point, you got to think about Lane Johnson. They always seem to get ahead of the game there because they're pretty young everywhere else. Mylotta, young guy. Dickerson's a young guy. Jurgens is a young guy. Steen's a young guy. So they're pretty young up front when you think about that offense. And even Becton's a young guy when you want to throw him into the mix.
Yeah.
He comes back too. So those would be the 2. They did trade out of 32 a couple of years ago. I believe
That's
they moved
Lamar
back
Jackson.
The Ravens took Lamar Jackson. I think the Eagles moved back and took Goddard in that particular draft. That's something they could look to do this time around again. Move out of 32, move back. Is a good tight end draft as well. So you could see them finally look to, last year there was a lot of talk about, maybe it was 2 years ago when Kyle Pitts was available. Do you take a guy to start to, 2 years away from losing Goddard? Well, now you're at that time where you might have to think about Goddard and his contract coming up. So tight end, maybe not at 32, but maybe you move back from 32 and take that guy in the second round.
Yeah, I asked Daniel Jeremiah about that exact scenario, the tight end scenario, because it happened. He said, there's not going to be a quarterback at 32 that people are going to believe is worthwhile to get that extra contract, the 50-year option. But he said there's a ton of tight ends, though, if you want to move down. And
good tight end draft.
And
I'm all draft up already, boys. I'm all draft up already.
Yeah.
Ready to go.
By the way, the Eagles, not only the
Michigan,
Eagles,
baby.
The Eagles went down, I believe, to 55 and then came back up to get Dallas Goedert at like 52. and might have been 49, somewhere in that range. But Zach Ertz was 2 years younger at that time than Dallas Goedert is right now. So, yeah, I wouldn't sleep on tight end.
Yeah. Yep. I remember this discussion, and John, we had it on my show with you a lot about Kyle Pitts, and it was like, hey, he's too, Goddard is right where Ertz was at the time. Now, Pitts was a high first-round pick.
Yeah,
there were some murmurs that the Eagles had some, and obviously that didn't work out. And Pitts hasn't quite been the player that many people thought he would be, although that Atlanta team, I think, is a lot of underachieving.
Was that the Devontae Smith draft? Or
was Pitts 2 years ago?
No, he's a little bit longer. He might have been. Yeah, he might have.
We actually had a chance to get him. Is my point. We were at what 10? We got Devontae. I think we traded.
They moved 12. Up from
they were
12
all
to
over,
10, I believe. 12 to 10.
Pitts went 8.
Yeah,
right. 8.
Pitts was one of the guys they had. They had like a group of 5 players they were interested in that year. And they started at 12, and he was one of the 5. But they kind of knew they couldn't get him.
Speaking of group of 5, there was a D tackle from Toledo that you went and got Quinyon Mitchell from there.
Yeah,
you could go back down that road to go to Toledo to get a D tackle.
Yeah. Mike, who was the Michigan guy you just said? I didn't hear you.
Kenneth Grant.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Yeah, probably would be there late. I don't know, 32, probably somewhere in that round, right in that range. You got the Ole Miss kid, Nolan, who had a little off the field problems, but don't.
By the way, I'm just looking at the draft that now it jogged my memory. The 5 players the Eagles were interested in were Horn, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain. That would have worked out. Jalen Waddle, Kyle Pitts, and Devontae Smith was the last one, and that's why they moved up from 12 to 10 to steal him away from the New York Giants. Now, also that year, Jamar Chase was that year. The Eagles knew they weren't getting him, so that's why. It's not like they didn't like him. They just knew they weren't getting him. They also loved Zach Wilson, which is conveniently ignored. But, they thought Zach Wilson was going to be, but they knew they couldn't get him.
He does have a big arm.
The 2, by the way, Michigan has the 2 tackles. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham is probably going to go higher. Yeah. The Toledo kid is Darius Alexander. He would probably be a guy I'm talking about. You could get 2nd, 3rd round in that same type of Milton Williams type of a lot of traits that he's going to have coming out of the combine this week. You'll hear about him.
Yeah, 32 is such an interesting spot in the draft because it's kind of it gets a lot more subjective at that point where people can make up their minds. All right, Mike, we appreciate you staying a little overtime, brother. Make sure you guys follow Mike at Mike Gill Show. Go and subscribe to his YouTube channel as well. He streams his show there at Mike Gill Show on there, and listen to him at 97.3 ESPN down the shore. One of the best to do it. Mike, we appreciate you joining in today, brother, and we'll talk to you again next week. All right, man?
See ya.
Thanks, bud.
There's Mike Gill joining us here on Birds 365. Great stuff from Mike Gill joining the show here. We'll have Brandon Lee Goutman coming up in a little bit. Johnny Mack, your thoughts on Mike Gill and what he had to say today? We talked a lot of tush push.
Yeah, too bogged down. I apologize for that tush push.
Well,
108 times, it's not that big of a deal. And by the way, they're not going to ban it. They're not going to ban the tush push. Eventually, they'll ban pushing on offense. I firmly, and that's going to happen within the next few years, but not until they sort of rebrand it, for lack of a better term. They're not going to ban one play. They're going to ban pushing as a whole on offense, which it used to be for those who've been around for a while. 2005 and before, it was banned, so not that big of a deal. And the Eagles will be fine. They'll be fine.
Good stuff there. Nick did comment on it yesterday. We brought that up with Mike Gill. Any takeaways from you on what Nick commented on? We talked about Howie in the open, but didn't really have a chance to talk to you about Nick. He normally doesn't say too much. I mean, it's Nick Sirianni.
We talked a little bit about Kevin Patullo, Parks Frazier, even though they haven't made that official yet. He kind of admitted he's the new passing game. But they still need a quarterbacks coach. Yeah. And that to me is probably a big hire from the standpoint of that's the guy working with Jalen Hurts on a daily basis. with Doug Nussmeier out the door with Kellen Moore. Yeah, he got bogged down with the tush push stuff too. That's why I'm like, oh, why are we doing this? But you got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth if it's being talked about, whether we like it or not. I think it's worth
oh
educating.
well, that's Nick
Yeah.
kind of got bogged down with it, and hey, I think Nick gets way too much shit. I think he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. I think he's proven that. But yeah, that prep thing. Come on, dude, settle down. Come on.
Yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. Doing there, John. You think Jalen Hurts will have any say in the quarterback coach hire? Like, will he be? Is that one where he'll have?
Yeah, I'm sure he will. He likes to downplay his say.
Yeah, he does. He down. That's out
of my jurisdiction.
Yeah, right. That's
job description, whatever. He says that all the time. But yeah, I mean, they're not going to hire somebody that he's uncomfortable with. That's just common sense. Same thing with offensive coordinator. If Jalen Hurts didn't like Kevin Patullo, he wouldn't be the offensive coordinator. You can bet on that. So yeah, but I mean, you also have to be, you can't let the quarterback run the show either. So,
right.
But it's a fine line, but that takes care of itself. I mean, if somebody's not going to get along with your most important player, he's not going to get the job. So,
No, it's kind of a catch-22 there. I don't know, John. I think they're going to move into an era here. The reason I asked that is because I do think Jalen's going to have more of a say moving forward. Not that he hasn't in the past, but isn't that kind of an evolution of a quarterback? And now he's got a Super Bowl under his belt. I mean, as he moves into the veteran years of his career, which he's really already now approaching, going into his 5th year starting, with the success that they've had, isn't that the kind of thing where your quarterback would have more of a say? And it's not about him, running the show. It's just about he's successful and he's a major part of your success. So he's going to have a say in what goes on to create that success.
Yeah, I mean, the more experience you get, generally, the longer leash you get at the quarterback position in the NFL. If you're good, at least.
Yeah, but winning goes with it. I mean, you don't see Kirk Cousins getting say. He's been around a long time. He's a great quarterback.
He's got shitloads to say.
Does he? Maybe he had too much because he never won. But
no, it's about handling things at the line of scrimmage. So he's a very, he's got. That's a bad example. I mean, that guy runs things at the line of scrimmage. I mean, that's just experience, and he's capable of, moving out of bad plays into good plays, vice versa. And we always talk about how Tom Brady defined himself as a quarterback, Peyton Manning. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about. And generally that comes with experience. And the more experienced quarterbacks have more rope. And that's natural. It's always going to be that way because they're smarter. They've seen more. Right. Phillip Rivers, late in his career. Nick can't stop talking about Phillip Rivers because he was so smart at the line of scrimmage. And he only had him for 1 year, and he still is in awe of the guy. Kirk's one of those guys. Matthew Stafford's one of those guys. And it's all experience related. Yeah. But the quicker you get there, the better. And you saw significant strides with Jalen this year from that perspective. Just the simple getting, you saw it a number of times with running plays. It doesn't even have to be a pass play. All right, they overloaded one side, so you kill to the other side. The one play with Saquon that turned into a big rush, he went up, killed it, and then on the same play got it right back to the original because the defense was moving around. So you've already seen improvement in that area from Jalen Hurts, and I expect that to continue. It's just, the more you see, the more comfortable you are with it. And, he's getting into that point of his career. He's only 26 years old. He's going to be 27 in August.
It's crazy.
But he's got a lot of experience. and he's getting better and better at it. And we always talk about, to me, that the next step is, the hot routes. God, I don't want to bring that up, but that to me, if he could click on that, then you get to the next level. But hey,
he made progress on that, at least from my perspective. I thought he did. Did you agree or no?
I don't think they're good at hot routes. I don't think they have been good at hot. Now, I think, and I advocated, I got that one right. I said in the Super Bowl, just throw go routes
And they did.
be done with it. And that's what they did, to their credit. And that's what I think you should do. But I also think in the offseason, our buddy Chris Franklin was the first to come. Then you go back and you try to evolve and you try to get better at the stuff you're not great at. And I think they're going to do that this offseason, just like they did last offseason. But it should be easier to identify a blitz and throw behind the blitz. That's something they got to get better at.
Yeah, and we'll see if they do that. Let's get to a couple super chats, then we'll get to Brandon Lee Gowan coming up at 9:20 here on the show. Alexander Harris, what's going on, my man? Appreciate your super chat. He says, why do I feel like Howie isn't going to sign Bond back, and Howie's excuse will be, well, we have Trotter and we believe in him. That's Alexander Harris. John, what's your response?
Well, if he loses Bond, he'll say that, but they're not going to lose Bond.
What do you want him to say? We don't believe in Trotter?
Yeah, something. Yeah, I mean, you do have to understand that whatever happens, the Eagles are going to spin it as a positive for the Eagles. However, I'm very confident that their number one priority is to re-sign Zach Bond. I'm very confident in that, and I'm very confident that they're going to get it done. I'm at 95% that they're going to get it done. So I don't think you have to worry about it. But if they do let him get to March 12th and somebody comes in with $20 million and it turns in a negative direction, then yeah, he'll say we're very confident in Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah, right. No doubt.
That's what you do.
Yeah, and that makes sense. That's where, we have John here who can decipher that help us decipher the good and the bad and the truth, right, as I like to say. JD3, what's up, brother? Do you both think there's a world where Clinton Hurt stays long enough to replace Vic? I think he is a name we will hear for a long time. That's JD3. He was a coordinator, defensive coordinator with the Seahawks before the Eagles, so he's already had experience as a coordinator. John, your response to JD3?
Well, I hope not, from the standpoint of, Vic is 66 years old. So, I mean, you always hope people stay healthy, but when you get to a certain age, things happen. Vic isn't leaving to go get a head coaching job. He isn't leaving because he's going to be ineffective as a defensive coordinator. So the only way he's leaving is from a negative standpoint, from a health stand. And Clint Hurt is still a young man who has been a defensive coordinator in the past. And this goes for Christian Parker as well, who hasn't been a defensive coordinator, but Clint has. They'll probably get other opportunities if the Eagles continue to play well on defense, and I expect them to continue to play well on defense. Christian Parker already got the interview with the Saints. It's probably more of a now he's on the radars for a potential defensive coordinator position. Clint already is. You're going to lose good coaches if you're a good team. Right. And the Eagles got the best defensive coordinator in football, so you don't want to lose him. And they're going to be good, so you're probably going to lose some assistants somewhere along the line.
Yeah, 66.
Better than the alternative.
66 is a funny age, though, John, because it's like he could hang him up at any moment, or he could have another 8 years.
I know.
You know what I mean? It's like he could. It's not unlikely for someone that age to retire. But then you have like Pete Carroll. I think he's like 73, and he just took a new head coaching job. So
and is the youngest looking 73-year-old on the planet.
Yes, Pete Carroll does look pretty damn good for 73. But that's an interesting spot with Vic. It's like could be 1 more year, could be 5, could be 10 more years. Who knows how long he'll want to go? But we will see on that. JD3, appreciate it. Josh B checking in. What's up, my man? Extremely hot sauna for those coughs, Johnny man. That's a good recommendation right there.
Yeah, that is a good recommendation.
They had a sauna at the I was in Lake Placid. They had a sauna at the house we stayed. It was one of those barrel saunas that you get for like the home.
Yeah.
Kind of grungy, but
Well, that's the thing. I don't like a public sauna.
Yeah,
That's a grungy situation. That's a good word.
there's no doubt about that.
I don't like a public sauna, and I don't have a private sauna, but it would be a good. Maybe I just turn the shower on the scalding hot.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go that way, but we'll see.
We'll
But I
see.
appreciate the advice.
Josh,
I'm out of the public sauna though.
John's out on public sauna. Yeah, that might make the cough worse. Let's go JD3 again. JD3, thank you, brother. J-Mac, it seemed Nick had a similar take as me on the tush push. If the defense can push a pile to stop a runner on an offense should be able to push to advance a runner.
Yeah, I don't get that at all. The defense's job is to stop the offense. The offensive job is to block the defense.
Right, it's defensive in nature. I mean, you're stopping what's coming at you. I don't really think it lines up either.
No, I don't like that comp. Again, for people that don't know, this used to be illegal. I don't know why they changed it. I don't remember. I asked Jeff. It makes no sense to me why they changed it originally. Now, I don't have any problem with the Eagles taking advantage of the rules. I used to say that about Bill Belichick all the time when he broke out that funky formation against Baltimore in the playoffs the one year, and John Harbaugh was losing his mind. If you can take advantage of the rules, do it. And the Eagles have taken advantage of the rules. So I have no problem with the Eagles doing it. But I don't think pushing offensive players should be in the game. I do think it's a safety concern overall, not on the tush push. But again, I bring up Devontae. I brought it up numerous times. Think about that play in New Orleans when he almost got seriously injured. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Why has that not been taken out of the game? Why was it put back in the game? Because it was out of the game. Why don't they blow whistles anymore? And you have these monsters, playing to the whistle as they should, and guys are susceptible to getting hurt. You already can't pull. Why can't you pull? What is the legislation? If you can push, why can't you pull?
It is weird. It's another one of those NFL. So I don't know where to go on it. Kenny Sprague checks in. JD3, appreciate your supers, brother. Kenny Sprague. What about Joey Bosa? I'm going to go ahead and say no thanks, Kenny. But John, your take.
I mean, yeah, if they move on from Joey Bosa, and there's a lot of talk they will, the Chargers, excuse me, he's only 29. It's a little bit older than Josh Sweat, so it's not about that. He's also far more accomplished. I mean, this has been a good pass rusher for a long time. Obviously, he hasn't, the last couple seasons, a lot of injuries, hasn't, been the consistent 10-sack guy, hasn't played a lot. So I'd be very cautious. But if his number is significantly lower than where it should be for his talent level, and that's a late signing on a one-year deal, I wouldn't mind it. But I would think somebody would give Bosa significant money because, betting that he'll stay healthy, and if he's healthy, he's going to produce.
Interesting name. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't wow me, but I get it. He's a viable edge rusher. I like more of a Crosby. I don't know. Can you send a little less than what you would have to send for Garrett for Crosby? The other thing I'm wondering on Garrett, John, is the market going to be as big as people are saying? Like, I know it's going to be big, but are people going to be willing to depart multiple first-round picks and players for a guy that's 29 years old? I know he's a great player, but...
Well, it depends where your first-round pick is. I mean, if you're a top 10, you're not giving up multiple first-round picks.
No way.
But the reason I have the Eagles and other people have the Eagles having to give up two, because they're starting with 32.
Yeah.
And then next year, they're probably going to have anywhere from 27 to 32, for argument's sake. Those are not high-level picks.
No, they're not.
Now, if you're giving up a top 10 pick, that's different. That's a different story. And Crosby is, he's a big-time pass rusher. Plays a lot. He's 100% guy almost. Good player. We'll see. I mean, if the Eagles are going to go about it on the trade market, I will say I don't expect the Eagles to go into a season where Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt are their starting edge rushers. Not with the Super Bowl window continuing to be open. They need a more proven commodity. That doesn't mean they're getting Myles Garrett. Doesn't mean they're getting Max Crosby. Doesn't mean they're getting Joey Bosa. But they're going to get a more. They got to find a more proven commodity. And obviously, Bryce Huff's not going to be that guy.
No, he's not. Last super chat here. Then we'll get to Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation. Brian Pumper says, if it's a boring play, I don't know how you ban aiding the ball carrier.
I'm not trying to ban the tush push.
Some of the best plays or crowd charging plays are those moments. Two-hand touch football.
First of all, you haven't heard me call it a boring play ever. Is it an ugly, non-aesthetic play? Sure. Who cares? There's a bunch. So is the bubble screen, as I say all the time.
That was fun.
It's ugly, but who cares? I'm not trying to ban the tush push. I'm trying to ban pushing in offensive football, period. Everywhere. I don't think it should be in the game. I don't think it should have been brought back in 2005. I don't know why I still don't know why they brought it back. I don't know why it's in the game. It has nothing to do with the Eagles tush push, from my perspective. The fact that the league brands it that way because they're stupid and they're not going to get it passed until they rebrand it. Then they'll get it passed in 10 seconds.
We'll see what ends up happening with it. We appreciate all the great super chats today. Well done by everybody. If you're in the chat right now, we appreciate you. Hit that like button. We're trying to get to 200 likes a day during the offseason. Can we do it? How close can we get? We appreciate all of you guys for being in here. Let's go to our man, BLG, Brandon Lee Gouton from Bleeding Green Nation, joining us right now on Birds 365. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Doing good, guys. How's it going?
Doing well. Sorry, getting a sip of coffee, trying to stay awake, BLG. But I don't want to talk about the tush push, but we're just talking about it again. So we want to think of your process. My process, if you just heard, I think they should ban pushing in offensive football. Period. End of sentence. Has nothing to do with the Eagles. I felt that way for a while. I do believe it's a safety issue. If you think about Devontae in New Orleans, that type of play should not be in the game. The whistle should be blown. You shouldn't be waiting for a bunch of people to push a bunch of other people. I don't know why they put it in the game. If you frame it like that, do you have a problem with it versus what the NFL does and says, we want to ban a play that the Eagles used 47 times last year? Who gives a shit?
Yeah, I guess I think I saw, if I'm not mistaken, the reasoning about, I think it was actually Mark Murphy and his comments about that. In terms of why they got rid of that, was because I guess they felt like it was too subjective at some level, or the refs wouldn't be able to necessarily always have the best view of that, and it would just be harder to legislate, I guess. But I mean, for me, the whole thing is like, how are we talking about this still? Like, this has been a topic.
I know,
as if it's like a new topic for multiple years now. It wasn't a topic last year when the Eagles were collapsing down the stretch, right? I don't remember it being as big of a topic when they were bad back then. So to say it has like nothing to do with being targeted at the Eagles is untrue. It absolutely is at some level.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's a poor way to go about it. If you want it out, that's I agree with you. I think the Eagles are in people's heads, man, in more ways than one. Whether it's Jeremy Fowler talk about trading for Myles Garrett, or how he's going to do this, how he's going to do that. The tush push, the Eagles are in people's heads. I agree with you 100% there.
I mean, even when they won the championship game against the 49ers, there was a whole, like, some teams have a really hard time taking a loss. The 49ers did. Like, we have to change the third quarterback rule. And, they did that. And then the Packers apparently, get beat by the Eagles twice this year. Like, well, we have to change the tush push, even though they did well with their own version of it, basically. And if whatever you want, it's silly. If you want to take out the pushing, fine. I think the Eagles will still be able to run it at a high rate. I also don't know, like, I'm curious what it means when people are saying ban. Like, what does that like fully look like? Like, how much are you banning? How exactly are you legislating that? I don't think people have specifically outline that. You have, John, I think, with you're saying not pushing forward, but I don't know. I just think there's so much more interesting things to talk about, not from just this level, but like the national level, the national NFL discourse.
Yeah.
Well, no doubt about it. BLG, let's move on because I don't want to get caught up too much in it, but I appreciate your take on it. Howie Roseman spoke yesterday at the NFL Combines. A lot of different takes on what he said. You know, some people walked out of there or listened to that and took away, we're not bringing anybody back. We're going to have a whole new looking team. Some others with different lines of thinking. What was your takeaway from Howie Roseman's comments yesterday at the Combine?
Yeah, I think Howie clearly tempering expectations there, knowing, and I think the fans kind of know, a lot of these players won't be back. I don't think that means they're literally re-signing no one. I think it just means that, they're not going to be able to resign most of the players that they're going to be losing probably to free agency. And that, unlike last year where they were able to sign Saquon Barkley, sign Bryce Huff as well, obviously that didn't work out, but kind of make these bigger moves, and really right at the start of free agency, the legal tampering period, that day both of those moves were made. I think he's kind of tempering expectations a little bit, and really the framing of what he said too was like a line that he likes to use a lot, that free agency doesn't end the first week of free agency. It goes throughout the whole offseason. I think they're going to be cognizant of other players getting cut. That's going to be part of what they want to do this offseason. Obviously, as they play for the comp pick formula, they're going to have to be patient and maybe wait for some other players, some other teams to get cut to be able to add those kind of guys instead of just chasing top dollar on the free agent market.
He mentioned the word evolve a couple times, talked about evolution, and he mentioned not traditional, paraphrasing, obviously, off season. From texting with some of the guys that were there, he was a little bit better off podium than on podium, Howie. I kind of took it as the non-traditional part is they're going to pay an off-ball linebacker and they're not going to pay defensive front people. And I do think that Zach Bond is the number one priority. I agree with that, but I want to play devil's advocate. They've had a lot of success, BLG, building the way they build and defaulting to offensive line, defensive front first. As great as Zach Bond is that evolution or is that overreaction and going away from what has made you successful?
I think it's exception. I think Zach Bond was an exceptional player in terms of how good he was, and also in terms of how unique he was and how important he is, I think, to what the Eagles want to do, specifically with Vic Fangio in this defense and the different kind of roles he can play and the things he can do. I think that's unique. It's not as just like, this is a good quality starting linebacker. This is a guy who is all pro, getting defensive player of the year votes. Like, you don't let that guy walk out the door. That's one you can make an exception for. Not to mention maybe leadership and everything too. And just, again, the state of the position when you really have nothing else there, with Nakobe Dean hurt, with Oren Burks going to be a free agent, and no other really proven players there. So I think it's just a unique circumstance where you make the exception for an exceptional player.
No doubt about it. BLG, what's your take on the White House thing that happened? A little bit of fake news going around, which is a fitting word to use, but it sounds like now the president is going to offer the invite to the Eagles. What did you make of just that whole situation, and whether or not the Eagles should or should not go?
Yeah, the original report seemed kind of shoddy to me in terms of there was a quote in there about an Eagles minority owner speaking. That's when is someone from Eagles ownership that isn't Jeffrey Lurie ever spoken about any kind of team related move? No. So what's kind of dubious at first, and obviously it's evolved since then, that the Eagles said they were willing to go, or at least they leaked that out to a lot of people. And President Trump apparently said that they're invited. We'll see, because I still think that everyone can say that now. Obviously, the players have a part in this. A lot of players might not want to go, and it's not like the Eagles, the team, can force them to go if they don't want to go. And that was the issue last time, where ultimately, basically, the Eagles were disinvited because not a lot of players were going to end up going down there, and it didn't work out ultimately. So, just because everyone's saying that now doesn't mean it definitely will happen.
Yeah, I expect a bunch of players to not go.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's where we are in the political environment. But just from the invitation standpoint, I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people don't remember. The Eagles were going to go to the White House. They accepted. As Doug Peterson, Nick Bowles, a couple other people were going to go. And they were disinvited at the last minute. I was going down, I remember. And I'm like, well, now I'm not going down. It was the night before, I believe. They were sort of disinvited. So last time they were going to go as an organization, and I think something similar is going to happen this time. I don't know how many players are going to go, how many players aren't, but it's up to the player. And it should be. Yeah. But they are going to get the invitation. They are going to accept the invitation as a franchise. And boy, we got to get back to a station in life, BLG, where everything isn't political. Sports team, championship, go celebrate it at the White House. Used to be a common thing. Nobody cared. Now it's everybody cares about everything. But that's that's another. We'll get it back to football. Myles Garrett. Jeremy Fowler came out with that sort of, boy, that doesn't strike me as Howie like BLG, like waiting for somebody else. Like I'm going to get Myles Garrett because Washington's going to try. That doesn't seem like a smart GM move. That isn't Howie. Like if he wants the guy, he's going to go after him. If not, he's not going to be worried about what the Washington Commanders do. Agree with that or disagree?
Yeah. I mean, Howie's going to have his plan. He's not going to let his plan be dictated by what the Commanders or another team is going to do. And yeah, I mean, as I've said before, I think Myles Garrett is that kind of player that, like, he's rare. He's a difference maker, and it's not simple because you're giving up significant assets to get him. But even what Howie talked about in terms of like a player who would be kind of worth those premium assets. I think Myles Garrett checks pretty much all those boxes. Maybe you could kind of quibble about age there, but I mean, I really don't think that's going to be an issue for him. And you see edge rushers, look no further than Brandon Graham, be able to play a little bit, longer than some other players do. Certainly, like, let's say, cornerbacks, for example, for the most part, Darius Slay being the exception. So, I still very much think that's on the Eagles' radar, but ultimately, I think if I have to say it's, more likely or less likely, I'm going to lead on the side of less likely.
It's a lot of picks and players though, BLG, for a 29-year-old guy. What point are you bowing out of that conversation?
I mean, but he's so good. He's like one of the best. Top 10, top 5. Like, we're talking about one of the very best players in the league here. And again, the way I've framed it in my mind is like I think he could be kind of like a Saquon level addition on defense, like just. Not that the Eagles defense wasn't great already, and not that he hasn't been great already. Obviously, he's been defensive player of the year, but I just think like, putting him in this environment, he could be a whole new level considering that, the Browns aren't playing with leads, and he's not playing with the same kind of players he could be playing and coordinators that with all due respect to Jim Schwartz, that he could be playing here. At what point am I bowing out? I mean, I guess it would just have to be like a no-brainer from the side of, okay, this is just obviously too much.
2 1s and no one?
I think that is too much in terms of what just precedent is. I think historical precedent. So obviously you have to pay him as well. And I don't think it should take that much. But if you're getting Myles Garrett.
The only reason I say that, and I brought that up as a potential, I'm just theorizing from Cleveland's standpoint, BLG. It's like if you lose an edge rusher, you might want an edge rusher back. They might want something else. But and then the Eagles' first round picks, they're not like other people's first round picks. It's not a top 15 pick. It's 32, and it's probably 27 to 32.
Sure.
Will be conservative. Those aren't great picks. So I think that elevates it because the Eagles are too good. But from your standpoint, if somebody's giving up a top 15 pick, they're not giving up another first round pick. There's a wide disparity to me with the Eagles pick versus maybe another team's first round pick.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you brought up a name that we haven't talked about a lot. Should talk about it more. So I'm glad you brought it up. Darius Slay. That's a difficult one for me. You got to do something with his contract. He's got no guaranteed money. He's got big cap number. He's going to be 35 on New Year's when the Eagles are in the playoffs next year, and they probably will be. We know the history of corners at that age. Amazing player. We lost Zander for a second. There he is. Pop back up. But what do you do with Darius Slay?
I think it's tough to bring him back. I know he's a team captain. Players like him and everything, but like you said, John, going to be 35. Like that's the history of cornerbacks aging, as we've seen with James Bradbury, and clearly, Slay has been able to make it beyond that point. But that's just a risky thing to bet on, I think. And we saw it this year. Even I think Slay had a great season, but he was in and out of the lineup in a lot of these games. Nagging injuries, not something that caused him to miss super long stretches, but certainly wasn't able to play 100% of the snaps in and out each week. So, and also like you have Quinyon Mitchell, you have Keely Ringo. I don't want to move Cooper DeJean outside, but he's part of the equation as well. You can keep Isaiah Rodgers maybe if you don't keep Darius Slay. Like that's a nice, younger group of cornerbacks to kind of move forward with. And I feel like if Howie's going to be talking about learning from sentimentality and needing to make tough decisions, I think like moving on from Slay is one of those decisions.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one there to move. I don't know. Do you think Cooper DeJean moves out, BLG?
No, I just think they had too much success with him in that role, and they basically were playing like almost full nickel to have him on the field, and that worked too well. And look, I think Keely Ringo, he obviously played a little bit at the end of his rookie season, showed some things. I thought he had a mostly good training camp last year. Obviously, didn't win the job, but there was stiff competition there. And again, Isaiah Rodgers might be a factor if you're not bringing Slay. So I think between all of what you have there, between obviously Quinyon Mitchell starting at one spot and then either Rodgers or Ringo at the other spot, I think you're cooking with gas in that setup.
With Cooper, I think that's a perfect example of what makes Howie Roseman's job so difficult. In the standpoint of, from a football aspect, we all look at it like he's the best nickel corner in football. Let's keep him there. Business-wise, nickel corners don't get paid like outside corners. And the Eagles they scouted Cooper DeJean as an outside corner. They believe he can play outside corner. Does the business aspect come into it at some point? And, his agent's going to be, this guy, one of the best defensive backs in football, but he's not going to get paid like it unless he plays outside. Is that an issue? Maybe not this year, but down the road.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to bring up for down the road, like you said. But even so, I think the Eagles would be willing to pay him, like an outside cornerback. And also, who knows? Maybe he does end up there. I wouldn't think as plan A, but injuries or something, other players struggle, then you might try to do that and see how that goes there. But for now, I just think I'm trying to keep him. I think Vic Fangio is probably wanting to keep him in the nickel as much as they can.
Yeah, no doubt about it. BLG draft coming up. Combine starts tomorrow. I think we're 57 days away from the NFL draft. As it stands there, the Eagles pick at 32. Let's just live in reality for a second. Who do you like at 32? And if you don't like, if you're not ready to give me a player, that's fine.
Yeah.
But a position group. Where do you feel like the Eagles are leaning position group wise with that with those first couple picks?
Yeah, definitely not ready to give you a name just because I can't believe we're already here.
I know, man. It's ridiculous.
It's so fast.
I'm with you. I'm like, I'm trying to catch up. Boy, I'm way behind.
Yeah.
I was like, we're not behind. I'm behind, Howie.
Yeah, way behind. I think based on, all the mock drafts I'm seeing and what has been said about this class by, people I really respect when it comes to the draft community, it's defensive line. Like that is kind of what seems like the sweet spot could be there at pick 32, assuming the Eagles even stay at pick 32. Right. Obviously they didn't last time when they were picking 32, when they traded down and the Ravens selected Lamar Jackson there. I think it's either edge rusher, as you guys were talking about, even before I get on John, you were saying, the Eagles aren't going into this season with Jalix Hunt and Nolan Smith as their starting edge rushers. And even if they were, you still need depth behind them because you don't really have anybody right now. Bryce Huff, okay. Who knows even, if Vic Fangio trusts him to play. We'll see about BG if he comes back or not. And Josh Sweat, I think it's good. It's gone. So, they need to really add more talent there. I think edge rusher will be good value, and also defensive tackle. You're losing Milton Williams again, likely. I think then I think the sweet spot for that kind of value there, you should be able to get an interior defender who can be part of that rotation that you have in there and help you out immediately, and then also kind of ideally develop into more of a starter down the road.
I think we're all. You just mentioned Josh Sweat as good as gone. I think we're all at that point. Why are we at that point? Like, what has Josh Sweat done that he's not valued at the point that the Eagles typically value defensive front players? Because this has been a good player for a long time. Maybe he doesn't have the Hassan Reddick sack numbers of 2022, but this has been a really good two-way defensive end for a really long time. What is it? Just the knee? Is it going all the way back to high school? What is it about Josh Sweat that hasn't resonated with this franchise?
Yeah, not even really just the Eagles. I think if you want to play devil's advocate and say, like, maybe this market will be a little softer than people expect it would be, because like last year when the Eagles, gave him a chance to kind of seek a trade, and then ultimately he had to take a pay cut. Clearly other teams weren't saying, oh, we have to have Josh Sweat. We need that guy. And for good reason at the time, because he was coming off of that extremely cold stretch to end the 2023 season. And even as Zander has pointed out in the show here before, also had a pretty cold stretch later this year, obviously before the Super Bowl, where he lit the world on fire in that game. And that's certainly extremely relevant, and I think could hugely factor into his market increasing. People, I think, will be, we'll put more weight on that performance considering the whole world saw it. So ultimately, I just think this has been a divorce in the making for a year now, with Josh Sweat taking a pay cut. I don't think there's any chance that Josh Sweat is taking any kind of discount to come back to the Eagles. I think he's going pretty much wherever the top dollar is, and I just don't think the Eagles will be offering that top dollar.
It does feel weird, BLJ, when you think about these free agents and you're like, they're going to sign the linebacker and they're going to let the two defensive linemen walk. That sounds like we live in an alternate reality when you're talking about the Eagles, if that's true. But I'm with you. I don't feel like Sweat's coming back, and I think Milton Williams is going to get paid too much money. But it does feel weird that the Eagles are, presumably going to pay a linebacker and not the defensive lineman. I don't know. It feels far-fetched, but could be the reality that comes March 12th.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, it is strange from the traditional roster building. That's why I kind of brought that up before, because you can make an argument that it has served the Eagles well and to go away from it. But I advocated too. Zach Bond was just too good this year. He was too good. I mean, and it was consistently good.
Yeah.
You get a splash play one week and then he falls off. He was consistently good from week one in Brazil through the Super Bowl in New Orleans. Amazing season for Zach Bond. If there's one player that deserves it, that should be an outlier, I think it is Zach Bond. But I'm like, boy, Milton Williams specifically, that's exactly the player the Eagles pay. That is exactly age. He hasn't played a ton. There's not a ton of tread off the tire because early in his career as a backup, explodes in his season. How he kind of talked about the extensions. He did this in the Super Bowl season as well. It's hard. He said it's hard to extend guys because you don't want to upset the apple cart. If you say, all right, this guy we should extend, this guy we're not going to extend, you're having a special season. Maybe you don't want to create waves in that estimate. So I get it from that standpoint. But everything about Milton Williams, they drafted him. Howie was the one who advocated for him. Tom Donahoe is the one who wanted Lynn McNeil. This is the guy they should bring back. And I don't get any sense they're bringing back Milton Williams. Is that any kind of surprise to you?
I guess part of the thing here, quickly on Bond first. I mean, it is funny to think that was his first season. So, he could maybe be better. At least, he'll have more experience. He'll certainly not be learning like he was last year.
I'm not going to bet on that, but you're right. Yeah.
Not better from the standpoint of hard for him to accomplish more than he did this year. But he, in theory, having more reps and everything, could be more experienced at it. But with Milton Williams, I mean, I just think like the writing is on the wall that the Eagles let him get to this point, right? Like how many young players like they do this with, John? Like, how they don't let these guys get to the market and then sign them. Like that's not their formula. The formula is always sign them 1 year early.
Yeah. But if you want to bet on
because
yourself,
you in theory get that discount.
If you want to bet on yourself for the to play that, and I think Milton did. He bet on himself.
Right.
Yeah.
He did. And I just think I think I want to be very like careful about this because I think Milton Williams deserves the contract he's gonna get, probably from another team in free agency. I'm really not trying to disparage him. I just think like when you're talking about $20 million, which who knows, might get up to that for a guy who had half of a sack in 2023, like that's kind of crazy. That's kind of crazy money to me. I think he is a good player, but I think he's ultimately going to get overpaid. And that's what free agency is. It's not unique to him. And good for him. I think he deserves, again, all the money he gets. But if I'm the Eagles and I have limited resources, I'm not trying to be that team that's going to overpay for a guy where, again, loaded draft class. Also, not to say that literally anyone can excel playing next to Jalen Carter, but I think a lot of players can have success playing next to Jalen Carter.
Good point.
And I think that's a big reason why Milton took off this year too, is because he played next to a dominant defensive line. And that's the thing. If you have Jalen Carter and he's as awesome as he is, you shouldn't have to pay another defensive tackle like top of the market money. Like that's the luxury of having Jalen Carter.
It's a good take by you because look, he's been an exceptional 3rd round draft pick, a great player for a 3rd rounder. But now you're talking about $20 million. I don't know if he's worth that. I think he's going to get that, but I don't know if for the Eagles he is worth that money. And remember, he also had an All-Pro linebacker behind him. He had a really good secondary as well. So everything was good around him. It's a good point by you, BLJ. I don't know if he's worth the $20 million plus. Might be a little bit of a letdown on his next team. We'll see.
I'll tell you from my perspective, and I love Milton personally. I think he's a great guy. I agree with you. He's going to get overpaid, and he's probably going to be a disappointment. He's probably going to be back on the market in 2 years. But at the same time, I'm like, boy, for the Eagles and the way they typically do business, this is a guy that I would have said 99 times out of 100, they're going to find a way to bring him back. So I'm kind of torn on. That's the one I'm torn on because I think he's a really good player. But to your point, BLG, I mean, yeah, Jalen Carter is going to make maybe Moro Ajomo look like Milton Williams next year. He's that good. So I get it from the Eagles standpoint, and that's why I'm torn on this one. And that's why some of these decisions are difficult. It's not difficult to decide to get Brandon Gouton on this show at Brandon Gouton on X. Make sure you follow him there, bleedinggreennation.com. Read him there, and his staff do a tremendous job. I wanted to bring up Jason Peters. I haven't brought up Jason Peters. I meant to. 2 decades, basically, in the NFL. Now, he hung around too long. If you talk to people in the Eagles, this is a no doubt about it Hall of Fame player. Lane Johnson still talks about him today. Jordan Mailata is just with reverence. In his prime, he was the best left tackle in football. But I feel like because he hung around so long, he kind of hurt himself a little bit when it comes to that, Canton level. We lost BLG.
We lost BLG. Let me see if I can get him back.
Yeah, I wanted to get his take on it. But I did want to mention Jason Peters because he officially retired. He's going to work in the Seattle front office with some of their players as sort of a mentor. But I don't know how much you heard there, BLG. But to me, this is a Hall of Fame player. To everybody in Philadelphia, this is a Hall of Fame player. Did he hurt himself too much by sticking around too long?
I don't think from a Hall of Fame standpoint. I do think, from a fan perception and legacy kind of standpoint, I think a lot of people think of the end years he's there again, he's in and out of the lineup. But I mean, I think that's tough because he was such an amazing dominant player. I think one of the most unique things I can say about Jason Peters, or one of the unique experiences I had, was just I remember one day he was walking back from the practice field to training camp. He walked like immediately by me. And as you know, John, I'm a tall person. I'm
Yes.
6'9". I'm not like a small person, but like Jason Peters, who's, I'm taller than, but he made me feel small. He made me feel like just how massive he is and how strong he is. He could just like take me and like rip me in half. That's just a unique. He's just a unique player for how big and strong and massive he was. But also then I saw some people tweeting out like highlights of his career on Twitter today, and just how his movement ability, like how he's so big, he's able to move so well and so fluid.
Yeah, it was a tight end at Arkansas. People forget, and then he just, the size and the athleticism, the size and the strength and the athleticism, really tough to duplicate. One of the good things, Howie spoke about him at the end. He called him that's my favorite Jason Peters story. So I'll give you that. He's a world champion. I'm glad he called him a world champion. I used to say this about Carson Wentz. There was when the Eagles came back after winning Super Bowl 52. One of the sort of at training camp, you were probably there that day. One of the sort of outstate reporters, I don't know if it was Allentown, but one of the guys who aren't there all the time asked Jason Peters if he liked to go back to the Super Bowl to become a world champion himself or a Super Bowl champion himself. And Jason basically looked at him in that Jason Peters intimidating look, and he was like, already got one.
Yeah.
The ring, world championship, or whatever he wanted. Just said, already got. I always thought if Carson Wentz took that approach, because Jason Peters was such a big part of that team, but he didn't play. Halapoulivaati, he got hurt. He was one of the guys who got hurt. Carson Wentz did not handle it that way. And Jason, I'll always remember him saying, already got one. And that death stare that he had. And he did. He already got one. He was a big, big part of that team. Phenomenal player. I've never heard Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jordan Mailata, they talk about him with reverence to this day.
And I don't know if you mentioned it in there, but like he was a good leader too, in terms of he'd be out there after practice helping young guys who had probably maybe even had no chance of making the team. Like he really cared, and and not players don't have to do that, especially a player like him. And not even just his own position group, like young offensive tackles, but like young defensive linemen too, and trying to get them better. So, I think Jason Peters was a huge part of this organization, not just as a player, but as a whole, as a figure, as a presence. Obviously, people remember, Nick Foles and Jason Peters getting in the face of Chris Baker after that. Like that stuff matters. Like he was a leader, and obviously it wasn't a great decision in the terms of he hurt his team by, getting ejected, but like ultimately what he stood for and that attitude and that mentality, a lot of the success, I know the Eagles didn't ultimately, they did win the Super Bowl, but a lot of the in other years, like he was a huge part of why they were good at all. Like in 2013, when Chip comes in, like he's a big part of that. He was an amazing
Jake
Hall of
Elliott
Fame player.
I should mention Jake Elliott.
Yeah,
when Jake got here.
That's right. No more misses.
No more misses. And Jake took that advice to heart. No more misses.
If Jason Peters tells you not to miss a kick, I think that is good motivation.
Yeah, good stuff there. BLG, thanks for joining in today, brother. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow BLG at Brandon Gouton and read all his work at Bleeding Green Nation, one of the best in the business. BLG, thank you, brother. We appreciate it.
See you guys.
Thanks, man.
There's Brandon Lee Gouton joining us on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, great show today, my man. We got 5 minutes left. I got a couple of super chats to read, but just your final thoughts there on what BLG had to say today on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad we got to Jason. No more misses. Already got one. Those are my two biggest remembrances. And just the way I remember when Brandon Brooks retired, just the way he talked about him. Lane still today, he tweeted, loves him. Jordan Mailata, coming from where he came from, not knowing how to play, not knowing how to put on his helmet. Those guys still talk about him like he's almost a mythical figure. And that tells you a lot about a player.
No doubt about it. Let's get to a couple super chats and we'll read them off there. JD3, what's up, brother? Again, appreciate all your support today. He says, how is pushing only a safety concern for one side of the ball? If the defense pushes, is that a safety?
I didn't say it was a safety concern for one side of the ball. Safety concern for all sides of the ball. Safety concerns because everybody's on the field going these extra seconds and extra instead of blowing the play dead. That's why I brought up Devontae. Now, that was an offensive player. Could have been the defensive player getting hurt. It's a safety issue because it's a safety issue. Not for one side of the ball.
It is inching us closer to two-hand touch, though, isn't it, John?
Well, if from the safety, I always talk about the hypocrisy of the NFL, because when people talk about safety, and this is not just the league, when they talk about safety, they're talking about concussions. That's it. Like, nobody cares that Nolan Smith tore his triceps, or Cam Jurgens hurt his spine, or Landon Dickerson's got to get knee surgery.
Which, by the way, I'm a little worried about that Cam Jurgens.
Yeah. So, people talk about it. So there's the hypocrisy aspect of it from that standpoint. But I'm talking about how the league does business. And the league does business based on legal indemnity, let's be honest. And this is a play, when you push and you let the play be extended, that becomes a safety concern. I think if Sean McDermott's in charge, and again, number one is Philadelphia, yes. Number two is Buffalo. So you can't look at Sean McDermott and say, in theory, he's hurting his team because they're really good at it as well. And he says it's a safety issue. Now, not the tush push specifically, pushing in general. And that's who I agree with. And eventually it's going to be out of the game. Now, I don't think it's going to be out of the game until they rebrand it in that fashion. I don't think the league is going to ban the play because it looks like they're penalizing one team. But I do think they're eventually going to ban pushing, just like they banned pulling. And it used to be not part of the game, and nobody cared, nobody realized, because it wasn't part of the game before 2005. So it's not like they haven't done it in the past. I think now it's getting to the point where enough people agree, and the legal indemnity is going to factor into it, and eventually it's going to go. So, and by the way, for Eagles fans, because that's the majority of people we're talking to every day, it's not going to matter to the Eagles. The Eagles are going to be really successful with the quarterback sneak.
I agree. We'll see what ends up happening with the tush push. Brian Pumper checks in. That Devontae play was no aiding the ball carrier. He was being held up by a bigger player for a defender to launch into him. Watch the tape.
Yeah, that's fine. And I just bring up, but there's examples over when you're holding up players, whether it's a defensive guy holding them up, whether it's offensive guy holding up, and they're not blowing the play dead because they think there's a chance that maybe somebody from one side or the other side is going to do something, and it creates a safety issue. And that's the bigger point. And that's why I talk about banning pushing as a whole, no matter where it is. It doesn't have to be on a quarterback sneak. It could be at the goal line, could be a running game where everybody gets behind the running back. Ban it completely the way it was banned before 2005. Did people not realize it was not in the league until 2005? Like, I don't know why they brought it back. It has created, as most things do, unintended consequences. The fact that the Eagles took advantage of the rule,
that's my problem with it.
Is not. That's what the Eagles should do,
right? But that's what the league wouldn't even be responding if the Eagles weren't successful at this.
That's true, but like with Bill Belichick and the formational tricks and lining up the tight end inside, nobody thought of it,
right?
Until the Patriots thought it, and then they changed it right away because they said, "Oh, this is a fucking loophole. We have cursing. This is a loophole. We got to get it. We got to close it." That's what's happening here. The Eagles took advantage of the rule. I'm an old school baseball guy. You go back to Billy Martin and the Pine Tar game. I don't know if you know that, but it's this famous game where George Brett hit a home run. Billy Martin was such a baseball wizard. He knew the rules back and forward. He saw the pine tar on the bat was higher than it should be. Stupid rule, has nothing to do with the game, had nothing to do with George Brett hitting a home run. But Billy Martin said, in the moment, I got an advantage here. I'm going to go out and say, this is against the rules. And he was right. He was 100%. They waved it off. They called George Brett out. The Royals, the Kansas City Royals at the time, they said, this is not in the spirit of the rule of the game. They're 100% right, and they changed it. They should have changed it. Stupid. Formational change, they should have changed it with Bill Belichick. Stupid. It was a loophole. They closed it. This is not good for the game. They will take it out, but they have to brand it the right way.
Interesting. That's a good baseball story right there, too, on the pine tar. I got to look that up. Great stuff there. We appreciate everybody checking in today. Johnny Mac, a little overtime. Just your final thoughts, man. Howie spoke yesterday. Nick spoke yesterday. We're 1 day away from the NFL Combine. I don't know exactly what we are. I want to say we're, 15 days away from free agency beginning and then 57 days away from the NFL draft. So moving right along, Johnny Mac. I got some draft work to do this week and back in the studio, brother.
Yeah, a lot of draft work is BLG. We're behind. Howie says he's not behind.
Howie's got a team of 60 people.
Yeah, well, that's true. Howie's got a bigger support staff than I do. But, yeah, they're behind, too. Don't kid yourself. But you'd rather be behind because you won the Super Bowl than the opposite. Right. So no issues there.
Yep, no doubt about it. Good show today. We appreciate everybody checking in today. Can't do any Zander time today. All right, I got to get out of here. I got some work to finish up after returning home. So we appreciate all of you guys. Johnny Mac, great show. Appreciate everybody. Hit that like button, and we'll see you tomorrow on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.